Hello, I'm Marcia Cavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. Well, those Saints fans were denied a Super Bowl. They proved to be super bold in their protests by staging citywide events that even affected national TV ratings. We'll look at the city saying no way to the no call tonight. We'll also look at the DA defending his procedures, more revelations about priests statewide, the problems with upgrading public housing opportunities, Entergy's new smart meter, and we will take a special look at mothers on the North Shore combating Facebook predators. Making the call for us are tonight's Informed Sources. Errol Laborde, producer of Informed Sources. Ramon Vargas, reporter of the New Orleans Advocate. Katie Moore, investigative reporter and anchor, WWL-TV Channel 4. And Jessica Williams, reporter, the New Orleans Advocate. We go on over to Errol first, and the city really showed the nation how to do it.
I think this is a really important story. I think it's an important urban story. People who study urban areas, it's more than having a party. It was really a community coming together to take a stand, unlike any way that's ever been done before. One thing that helped is it was an issue that everybody was united on. There was no division among race, gender, or anything else, and so everybody was pretty much united on this. And plus, we have the ability to organize things fairly well in New Orleans, especially things that involve the street and parties and music. And so I think all of that was effective. I don't think any other NFL city facing a similar circumstance would have come anywhere near close to doing what New Orleans did. But to me, what really distinguished this, apart from any other kind of demonstration or protest that I can think of, is that the big weapon, the big thing they were trying to achieve was to try to lower the television ratings nationwide, and they did. Very successful. I mean, to split, can you imagine in New Orleans just cutting down the Super Bowl ratings to 25% and the impact that had on the rest of the nation? And also, I think that the general ruckus going into this just turned off some people to the Super Bowl anyway. And so New Orleans, in its own way, made a statement. And just today, they had a press conference, and part of it is they said, anytime we do something now, people say, well, let's get a charity angle. And so they said, let's raise money. And so they gave a check to the city for the recreation department for $75,000.
For 57, it was 57,000, yeah.
And you look back at it, and really, I mean, emotionally losing the Saints in the Super Bowl was terrible, but from a financial side, New Orleans probably came out ahead, instead of having all those people going to Atlanta and spending their money there.
They spent their money here.
And all of the money that was raised, and it was an incredible story. But you know what it reminds me of is that this year is the 40th anniversary of the police strike. That was in 1979. And this was when the police essentially held Mardi Gras hostage. And they said, we're not going to work unless there's a settlement. And the mayor Morial at the time and the crews all stood together, and we said, we're not going to be held hostage by the Teamsters Union. It was a very historic moment, and so there were no parades in Orleans Parish. There were some in Jefferson Parish, but none in Orleans Parish. But when Mardi Gras, the day came, the police had lost anything they had, and that day turned out to be a very, very festive day, and people were out and they were celebrating. And it just reminded me of that sort of situation where the city taking a stand on a very, very tough issue, because if they had given out, one thing the police wanted was compulsory arbitration, which means the city would have lost control of negotiating with the police. If the city had given in, it would have been terrible in the long term to the city. And so they stood together, and in the end they celebrated. So I think that's twice when New Orleans has really proven itself. But this particular thing, I hope when New Orleans has its 600th anniversary, whatever that's called, and they look back at that 300 years, and this is a story that people will tell, because I think it's a very important story.
Well, of course, this was a story that went nationwide of how New Orleanians, decided we were going to observe this anyway, and we were going to enjoy the day and let the rest of the country and the NFL know that we really didn't appreciate nor agree with what they did. So the Boycott Bowl, that came together in, less than 2 weeks, and it was a major concert. In
less than 2 weeks, there was the main concert, but there were a lot of satellite events around the community too. So a lot of alternatives, a lot of bars that showed the 2010 Super Bowl in which the Saints played. And all of that, I think, probably had an impact on the TV ratings too. And so it was very effective. And it was kind of aided, I guess, in the long run, in terms of looking back at it, that the game itself turned out to be pretty terrible. Okay, but I can't tell you because I didn't watch it either. Okay,
No, I
but
didn't
from what
watch
I
it
hear, it was a very boring game. And Ramon, did you see it? I know you're a sports guy. Okay,
No, I was
and then
driving
and the score certainly indicates that it was a boring game. And you got to think it was 13-3. You got to think if the Saints would have been in there with Drew Brees and Sean Payton, they'd have gotten more than 3 points.
It would have been a really exciting
in
game.
there.
Yeah.
And so, in retrospect, you got to think that the Saints in the Super Bowl would have made a much better game, and you'd think that the people in the NFL probably realize that.
Of course, there were comments that were made, by folks across the country, including, I've read reports of some of them. There's one guy from ESPN basically said that we really knew how to throw a tantrum, and, we certainly did. And then another tweet from somebody saying, well, at first I thought it was foolish for New Orleans to boycott the bowl, but apparently the teams did too in the first half, because it was just not
sometimes
an
I think
game.
we overly romanticize New Orleans, talking about, what a special place it is, and laissez la bon temps roulé and all of those kind of cliches. But last Sunday showed that it's true, all right, that New Orleans, that there is a really special feeling in there among the population, which is a largely native population. But even the people who've moved into New Orleans over the last few years, they really didn't move in necessarily because of business reasons. They moved in because they liked the town, and there's a strong feeling. And so it made me realize, of all of the 59 TV markets, New Orleans had the lowest rating. Usually that's a bad thing. Okay, usually something that you criticize, but in this case, it was a good thing, and it just showed me that, this town is special, and the people in the native population, or the population, does have a special feeling.
Think about it this way: we know how to funeral, right?
Yeah.
And so it only makes sense that we were able to do this in something that's sad and that everybody was really depressed about. And so, we flipped that around on its head, and that's what we do.
And we even had a jazz funeral for that too. That's a good point, though.
Exactly, and like you said, Errol, we know how to take to the streets and peaceably and enjoyably have a party, and do it with our neighbors from all over. All righty, thanks a lot. Okay, Ramon, all right. The district attorney and counsel at large member Jason Williams, both are kind of going at each other. And it could be a race that we might see in the future, although we don't know if Canizero is going to run again. But there's real criticism, and council passed a resolution regarding material witness warrants that the DA has used, which he says he legally can do. So there is really some dispute now about this.
Sure, and in going back earlier in the week too, when Leon Canizero got up in front of the Metropolitan Crime Commission and really railed against the city's efforts to reduce its jail population, which accompanied state efforts to reduce the population in prisons for people who've been convicted of crimes as opposed to people who are awaiting trial. Maybe those remarks weren't necessarily that surprising given Leon Canizero's background, but it really sounded like a campaign speech, and even if he doesn't run, it certainly suggests that he's not going to get behind Councilman Williams if Williams follows through on his declared interest in the job. And so that happened on a Wednesday, and then on Thursday, the council resolution kind of coming out against material witness bonds and calling for the end of the practice. If you're, the DA's office certainly says that it doesn't happen nearly as much as advocates say it does, and that it's a tool that's on the books that they use only in cases where they absolutely need to. On the other hand, if advocates of violent crime victims are appalled by even it happening once, where either a sexual assault victim or a other violent crime victim is jailed to not coerce, but to force their testimony, and the way the DA sees it is, if that's a crucial point to put away very dangerous people. But at the same time, you can certainly understand the other side of the debate, which the idea of if I had been attacked and then, the idea of going up in front of a room full of strangers and recounting it and then looking my attacker in the eye and saying, that this person did it's intimidating, and I can certainly understand. I certainly understand the other side of the debate too.
Right. Well, once again, he says that this isn't used often. That out of 85,000 warrants or something like that, it's only been used 28 times, and most of those, with the exception of 2, were for murders. But why is there even the need to perhaps jail a witness? Why is that even coming?
Certainly it's a reality. I mean, witnesses getting, we've covered stories of witnesses getting killed before their testimony date in the city, and so certainly that has something to do with it. The idea of retaliation, if you testify against somebody who did something to you, that retaliation is a real threat. And so that's obviously a drastic resort, is to put someone in jail to make them testify, and then once they testify, they're out again. It's something I've seen in Jefferson Parish, as well, and more. And I think this is all to say that really it became clear that Leon Kennedy drew a hard line in the sand between him and Jason Williams, whether he's running against him or not. It's a good chance that he's going to support an opponent if Jason Williams does follow through on his interest in the job.
So this resolution passed by council is calling on the legislature to revisit the law that allows for these warrants for material witnesses, right?
Yes,
Okay.
and it's the resolution obviously doesn't carry force of law. It's more of a comment on the substance, and it's and obviously a suggestion and a desire to see that change.
This line of thinking reminds me of the RICO laws, which allowed law enforcement to do things that in the past you couldn't do, especially with wiretapping. But it did have an impact. It did open the way in terms of a lot of. These are mostly aimed at the mafia, but there have been times when you had to go to these laws that don't seem quite right, but it gave law enforcement some leverage.
Certainly not in the case of sexual assault victims or domestic violence victims, at least not that I've seen in some of the
So,
things that you've covered.
the idea of putting a witness in jail to force them to testify, no matter who it is proven to be controversial. It is especially controversial if you are a victim advocate, and you see that happen to somebody who was sexually assaulted or otherwise attacked, and they are the victim. And I think that's certainly drawn a stronger reaction than in
and certainly more controversial.
Okay,
I would agree with that.
We'll see what this goes, because obviously the DA really strongly disagrees with this resolution and just says there should be no changes made. So, like you said, two very different points of view that we may see in a DA's race. But then again, we may not see it between those two. So we'll just wait and see what indeed happens. All right, thanks a lot, Ramon. Jessica, over to you. Some folks now have smart meters, Entergy smart meters, and it looks like eventually the entire state will.
Are certainly the parts of the state that Entergy covers, which is a wide swath of the state. So Entergy New Orleans and Entergy Louisiana this month. Entergy New Orleans actually got started this week installing what they call smart meters, which essentially, if you think about the way that you view your energy usage and your bill now, it comes to you every month. You can see what you've spent over that 30-day time frame. What Entergy hopes to do with these smart meters is allow you to go online on your smartphone or on your computer and access your power usage every 15 minutes. You can set goals for yourself if you want to reduce your electricity, if you want to set reminders to turn off your AC or whatever you need to do throughout their notification system, you can do that. And Entergy says this is really the first step towards what it sees as a larger modernization of its operations, of its grid, and it's one that both the City Council and the Louisiana Public Service Commission for Entergy Louisiana support.
And also they say that it could lead to greater energy efficiency, because somebody looks at real time what kind of power is being used in their house. They can make adjustments.
They certainly can. Rather than waiting until the end of the month, if you can see sort of, hey, when I had my, air conditioning turned up to 75, then it was a little bit less on my bill for that month, or for that price range was a little bit less than when I turned it down to 71. So you make decisions based on that. You can turn it off when you leave. You can turn off lights in your house if you see that that's making an impact on your bill. And that is one outcome that Entergy does anticipate, is that customers will begin to realize a savings over the long term. Although the program, once it gets started, is going to cost us a little bit more on our bills.
Once it begins, but then they say it'll start to average out. However, it will also cost some people some jobs.
It will. It'll be particularly the contracted meter readers that Entergy now has to come out to your home and read your meter manually every month, that go out and flip the switch on your power when you move into or out of a house. Those folks are going to be out of jobs. Now, Entergy has said that most of those folks are contracted. They've said that for the few folks that are Entergy employees, they are offering them positions within other parts of the company. And they've stressed the timing of the rollout. We'll see the last round or the last batch of meters in New Orleans being installed in 2020 and around the state being installed in 2021. So that's 2 or 3 years. Will give people some time to explore other options.
Now, you can opt out too.
You
the
certainly
customer
can for a fee. So
And
in
you'll
New-
pay a monthly fee
And you'll
too.
pay a monthly fee. And in New Orleans, that fee is going to be steeper than it would be in other parts of the state, simply because the city council approves whatever fee that you would pay in New Orleans, whereas the State Public Service Commission approves it for the rest of Energy Louisiana.
Okay, and that fee would be to cover, in part at least,
The manual
meter
folks
reader.
who are coming
Right.
out, the meter readers who are coming out and reading your meter
Right.
manually every
Okay.
month.
All right, Jessica, thanks a lot. Over to Katie. Some North Shore moms have taken it upon themselves to go to Facebook and try to find predators, sexual predators on young girls.
Yeah,
or
they
young
have.
kids.
Yeah. So it's a group called Southern Mothers Against Predators, and they are part of a trend that's a national trend where people are creating these Facebook groups where they will go on Facebook Live and they will track down these predators and confront them on Facebook Live. So everyone in the community or that's in the virtual community can watch and see, this whole thing unfolding. It obviously raises a lot of questions, both from their safety and the safety of the people involved, and then, privacy questions, which is why in my story that I did on it earlier this week, we heard from Facebook saying, we've taken down a lot of these sites because we feel like this violates our provisions against cyberbullying because it is a public shaming. There is no law enforcement involved, so they're not out there to make an arrest. It is simply a group of mothers who does this on Facebook Live after chatting with people over a period of time through various apps, gaming apps, social media apps, traditional ones like Facebook and Instagram, others that are texting apps. They'll create this phone log with these people. Once the person says they want to meet, that's when this group goes out there and confronts them on Facebook Live.
So what happens? A group of mothers goes out and meets this person, or?
Yeah, the main woman in my piece, her name is Holly, and she, takes the person who's viewing from home from their Facebook feed through the whole process. And it's very interesting when you look at some of these videos, and I think that's part of the reason that these groups keep gaining traction around the country, because when you watch it, it is intriguing. You want to know what's going to happen, and obviously anything can happen, and that's the concern.
Right, law enforcement concern also is that, as they say, they can find the backgrounds of some of these individuals,
Yes.
whereas these moms perhaps can't. They
Right.
they really don't know who they're meeting up with.
They don't, and they try to do as much homework as they can. They try to make sure that they know who the person is, to know everything that they can about them through whatever public means they can, to make sure that it is safe and that it is just a conversation between Holly and the person that she's confronting.
Do they consider themselves, the moms, sort of engaging in vigilante justice?
I asked them that question, and she said, I knew you were going to ask me that question, because I think that's a question that all these groups get across the country. Are you vigilantes, and are you encouraging sort of a mob mentality to go and, go after these people with a virtual pitchfork, She says no. She feels like she's not breaking the law. She is conducting these, sort of sting operations in a way that she feels, law enforcement does very similarly. And so she really feels like if she confronts these people, and if this group manages to confront these people and publicly show, hey, what you're doing is wrong, that will prevent even that one person from doing it again. And I think that they have a lot of support out there because of the fact that we all know law enforcement's overwhelmed, and people want to protect their children, and they feel powerless.
So any charges or arrests from the evidence that these moms have got?
No, and that's one of the other controversial parts of this, is that law enforcement has not been involved with SMAP over on the North Shore. There have been no arrests made based on their evidence, and I think there's a real sense from law enforcement and talking to the people who are in the piece and just other sources that they're concerned that there are entrapment questions. They're concerned that the evidence might be tainted. They're concerned about the fact that what if they are also conducting an investigation into someone that SMAP happens to come across? So those are the questions and concerns that they raised. But like I said, there's a huge number of people out there who say, good for you for doing this. You're taking matters into your own hands.
But from
when
your
law
story, it
enforcement
seems
can't.
like that they scared a couple of people away, at least.
Yeah, they did. And, Holly will tell you that, another one of the people that she has confronted they came across that person online again, and that person then blocked them once they told them how old they were, as a decoy. And so she's like, well, mission accomplished in that case.
So they'll continue to do this.
She's continuing to do it, and I know that her group has grown since we did the story. And again, groups all over the country doing this, raising questions by law enforcement and Facebook and.
Didn't one of them
and the
say
like.
that they were a victim as a child? Or
Yeah, she did. She was a victim. She didn't really want to go into detail a whole lot when I was talking to her, but yeah.
Okay. All right, Katie. Interesting story. Thanks a lot. Ramon, over to you. Other dioceses in the state now have released some names of priests with credible accusations against them.
Sure. The Diocese of Alexandria this week released a list that had detailed capsules, if you will, of what the cleric was accused of doing or admitted to doing or was proven to have done. But at the same time, while it was transparent on that front, it was not transparent on another front where it then lists a single pastoral assignment in the diocese, which obviously galls victim advocates, clergy abuse victim advocates, because it's a pretty crucial component to kind of know where this might have happened, because if somebody else is out there who hasn't disclosed that they were abused by that cleric in another parish, and it's really a kind of a key component to understanding the history that any one of these clerics has. And we can compare it to Baton Rouge, which said the number of allegations against a cleric and where it occurred and when it occurred, which really seems to have been the most kind of complete one. Yet at the same time, without saying, none of these lists have really come out, I think, in a way that's like satisfied anybody that's really looking for a full accounting. There's still questions about how many victims in any diocese there were, and exactly how many churches this affected, and that as these lists kind of come out, we're getting toward the end of the 7 dioceses. I think there have been 4 at least that have come out as of today, and we're getting to the end of these dioceses, and none of them have really, and the bigger ones have already come out. So
Why did Alexandria Diocese choose to do it this way? What was their explanation? Did they?
It was really an infuriating answer to a lot of people was that communities didn't need to be re-traumatized by revisiting a shameful episode in their history, and I think the trauma, obviously, is to the people that experienced trauma in all this were the ones who were abused by these clerics who were in positions of authority and trust in the community.
And victims advocates are calling for transparency, full transparency across the board. So what other dioceses still are going to? Are they all going to release lists?
So they've all made plans to release them. You're talking about places like Lake Charles, Lafayette, Shreveport, if I'm not mistaken, and that's about it. I mean, those are the 7 in Louisiana.
All right, Ramon, thanks a lot. All right, Jessica, back over to you. Hanno put forth a new program with Section 8 housing. They started it last year. Can you explain it, and how successful has this been, or not?
Sure. So the Section 8 program, for anyone that needs a little bit more information about it, was started back in the 70s as a way to sort of deconcentrate poverty in the public housing projects. The thought was that if you gave folks the choice where they wanted to live, it would be better and more beneficial for them over the long term than sort of having them in excluded pockets of the city. But in practice, that theory hasn't worked out as well as officials intended. And so HUD and Hanno, with HUD's authorization last year, instituted a reform to the Section 8 program that essentially said in 5 selected zip codes in the city where there are high rents and close to public transit, less poverty, we're going to give landlords who sign up a little bit more than we would normally give them to try to encourage more landlords to participate, to try to get Section 8 tenants into more centrally located and less farther out parts of the city. And they did this for about a year last year, and they recruited about 140 people to participate. However, the way that they calculate the payout is by zip code as opposed to by individual, the Audubon neighborhood, the Carrollton neighborhood. And so when Section 8 tenants had the option, they chose to live inside of large zip codes, inside of smaller, more impoverished areas, inside of a generally wealthier zip code. And that was by choice in a lot of instances, and the reasons that are being offered for it are varied. One woman that I talked to said that she didn't feel comfortable moving to Lakeview because she was concerned about how her neighbors might perceive her. She's heard stories from other people who have moved in other parts of the city, who have felt uncomfortable, and she just didn't want her kids to be subjected to any sort of, stigmatizing of them for being Section 8 tenants. Another family said that, when you raise the rent, that's more in security deposit that I have to give, and I can't afford that. The Section 8 program doesn't cover security deposits. So just several reasons why people did not ultimately take advantage of the opportunity that they were offered.
Are landlords jumping on this? Are they taking advantage of it? Or
HANO has acknowledged that their outreach to landlords needs a little bit of work. It's partnered with the Greater New Orleans Fair Housing Action Center to try to recruit more landlords to participate. But as one of the board members said at the most recent meeting, we could be doing all that we, think is necessary, but if landlords don't buy in, the program doesn't really have a strength. And so they're really focusing on trying to recruit both more landlords and more tenants into the program to see if over the long haul it can be successful.
so it will continue, this program?
It will. It has been extended indefinitely.
Okay. All right. Time to look ahead. E.
Well, now that we know that Anthony Davis will finish the season with the Pelicans, if you want to see him play with the Pelicans, you have 15 more chances at least at home. That's how many games are left after tonight's game. So it's probably something in terms of New Orleans sports history you want to see. The regular season ends April 9th against Golden State, which is probably something else you want to see.
All righty. Ramon.
We'll have a story in tomorrow's paper outlining local Catholic cleric with ties locally, that his kind of trail of victims that he left behind didn't really become clear until these Louisiana lists came out, including the one from Alexandria earlier this week.
Okay, doke. So that's this weekend?
Tomorrow's paper.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Ramon. Katie.
I have a story actually coming out tonight on Channel 4 at 10 o'clock that looks at a charter school program that was sort of applauded as, a leader in education. Problem is, there's now a long list of employees that worked for that program who say they had a hard time getting paid.
Oh, okay. We'll be looking for that. That's tonight?
Tonight at 10 on Channel 4.
All right. Thanks.
Be on the lookout for this other energy development next week. The City Council is going to finally decide whether or not to rescind their approval of the energy power plant. So we'll be on the lookout for that.
This is on the heels of the actors.
This
right?
is on the heels of the paid actors controversy.
All righty. Thanks a lot, Jessica. Thanks, guys, for being here, and thank you all for joining us. And, of course, we want to see you again next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening.